Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. This is Parsha Talk. I'm Grossman, and with us, we're very happy to have Rabbi Shalom Berger, who is, I think he's the director of, I just lost it. It jumped off the screen. The English language program, or programming at Herzog College. And that's a teacher's college. I remember that Lipschitz used to be right in the middle of Jerusalem, and Herzog's in the Gush, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's correct.
And your picture froze. Okay, and eventually, I think that they sort of had a combination. Now they're in tandem, and it's only in the Gush now, right?
Well, that's not exactly correct.
Okay, so correct.
Herzog, Lipschitz and Michel Herzog, as you say, about 3-4 years ago, were joined together. That was encouraged by the government of Israel that was felt that we're 20 of these small teacher colleges, so let's put the ones that have similar philosophies together. So Herzog and Lipschitz joined. Michel Lipschitz still has a building in downtown Jerusalem where they do other kinds of programming, but not academic programming. Michel Herzog has several campuses, two in the Gush, two in Gush Etzion, one in Alon Shvut, where I live, one in Migdal Oz. It's a men's campus and women's campus. Their campus in Jerusalem now actually is Heichal Shlomo. Those I trust that anyone who's been to Jerusalem has walked past Heichal Shlomo right across the street from what used to be the Plaza Hotel, whatever it is, next door to the King's Hotel, next to the Great Synagogue. That now belongs to Michel Herzog. They have a museum there. They have their master's program. Michel Herzog has both a B.Ed and a master's program. The master's program is in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm. And they have they actually have an English department there, and they actually have fellows who are doing their degrees in English now, right?
So Michel Herzog is a teacher's college. It's, even though I think most people who know about it connected with Tanakh especially and Jewish studies generally, in fact, it's a teacher's college where people can get degrees in teaching all kinds of different subjects: math, biology, English, etc. 99% of that is aimed at Israeli teachers who are going to work largely in the Mamlachti Dati system, in the Israeli school system, mainly in the religious system. And just in the last year or two, we have begun reaching out to a broader audience outside of Israel. There's a Spanish program, and I'm in charge of the English programming. There's a program, we have a group of 20 teachers, most of them in South Africa, some in the United States who are doing online classes. And we hope to bring, when they open the airport, we hope to bring them to Israel for a semester as well.
Okay, full disclosure, I'm a graduate of Machon Lev and then the Yellen Teachers College. I found a world of difference. I'm not going to make any value judgments here. Machon Lev obviously is a religious institution. It's entirely, it's only men there. It's connected to a large yeshiva gedola. And Yellen is, I wouldn't say it's necessarily secular because there's a shul right when you go in there, but it certainly is a lot more varied. It's co-ed, and it even has a lot of non-Jews there. And like I said, there's the world of difference. I can understand why, and I would encourage people to stick to the institutions that I guess are more religious and also not co-ed. Herzog is also, it's separate campuses for men and women, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So that's something that people should take into consideration. Everybody should go where what's good for them. But I probably would consider Herzog more than I considered it beforehand when I did not go there. But that's in the past. And I certainly saw that at Yellen they didn't have specific programming in English. I thought that was something that they perhaps should have, and they were actually hamstringing themselves. They even had some tracks that were entirely in Arabic also. That's something they have. They have everything's in Hebrew and then Arabic. And I was surprised how little English they actually did have. Even though officially you're supposed to know English for a lot of things. So it's good that they have this, and I recommend that. So tell me, we're also involved in the Korean Steinsaltz Talmud. And I remember this one. I remember being introduced to the Steinsaltz Talmud before it was Korean, when my father started studying Bava Metzia. Just as a coincidence, my brother started Gemara, and I happened to be learning Bava Metzia, and that was the one volume of the Steinsaltz Talmud that Random House published back in the day. That must have been maybe 92, very early on, almost 30 years ago. And I don't know how many volumes Random House ended up publishing, except for Rav Steinsaltz's also his guide to the Talmud, his basically his handbook was also published by Random House, and then it stopped, and then Korean picked up the whole project, and Rav Steinsaltz, of course, Zatzal, passed away this year. The project of actually the Talmud Bavli, at least, was finished quite a while ago. There's even a volume there of the Yerushalmi. How is it that Korean came to be the publisher of the Korean Steinsaltz? Sorry, Talmud.
I reached behind my chair here and came up with the reference guide to the Talmud, which you made reference to. But this also was put out by Koren now. It's no longer. It's also redone. Let's back up and say a little bit about the Steinsaltz endeavor in general, and then we'll talk specifically about the English, which, as you say, started quite a few years ago with the Random House edition. When I was really, really fortunate to meet Steinsaltz still when this project began, and to sit with him and to talk to him, and he was a fascinating person. And he himself would readily admit that when he started as a 25-year-old with his modern Hebrew translation of Gemara Brachot, he mistakenly thought it was a kind of thing. Just a couple of years, 3-4 years, and you have the whole shas out. And it turned out to be an endeavor that took well over 40 years. His basic approach was that Torah Shebechtav, Torah Sheba'al Peh, is a cultural inheritance that belongs to all Jews. Mm-hmm. Every Jew should be able to learn Torah. Torah should be approachable to everyone, whether you sit in yeshiva Yom V'Layla and you commit yourself to years and years of learning, or you're someone who just finds it interesting and wants to be literate or at least able to read what Torah is. And even more than Torah Shebechtav, the Gemara is something that many people found to be unapproachable because of the language. The Aramaic is difficult even for someone who can read Hebrew and has no trouble reading without nikudot. All of a sudden, you open up this book, which is one of the basic books of Judaism, of Torah, and what do you know? It doesn't make any sense. And he started out by saying even non-religious people, even people who aren't committed to a life of keeping mitzvot, these books should be accessible to them. And as such, he started with a modern Hebrew translation, which reads, in the Hebrew, it actually reads much better because you sort of get the flow. You start, the words, the actual text is mixed in with the translation. And instead of getting involved in more traditional yeshiva kinds of discussions, the notes that he has were much more explanatory, whether that was just explaining basic concepts that go beyond the words themselves, or even maps, biographies, those kind of things that someone, in yeshiva, you aren't taught to say, well, who was Rav Papa anyway? But someone who isn't used to the yeshiva approach wants to know who these people are, who's talking. So those kind of things he added in order to make it accessible. When the suggestion came up, and this was certainly well before I was involved in anyway, to open it also to an English audience, so it was picked up by Random House. If you remember that, the Random House volumes were coffee table books.
Yes, they're very pretty.
They were pretty. I mean, I have to say the Koren books are also very pretty, but they really were coffee table books. They were set up in a way that someone wouldn't study it. Rather, someone would look at it. I would say it was to that extent. Now, there certainly was a translation, but it wasn't set up in a way that it could be learned. And they found after, as you said, just a couple of volumes that, it wasn't selling. And as such, Random House dropped out. About 10 years ago, the Steinsaltz people made an agreement with the Koren people to become the official publishers of all of the Steinsaltz works. Everything that's published by Steinsaltz today is put out by Koren. Even the original Hebrew volumes are now put out by Koren. Everything that the Steinsaltz people said, we aren't good at marketing, and we aren't necessarily, this is our area of expertise, and they transferred everything to Koren. And at that point, so for example, the reference guide, which we mentioned before, it wasn't just reprinted. The team that I worked with went through it and tried to make it user-friendly for an English speaker. The original conception assumed that people knew too much. This one has a much better index, and it's set up much more logically. And then the Koren people put it out. And then, as that went along, in retrospect, I couldn't imagine how it could have been otherwise. There were discussions, what the sector should we start with, until someone finally said, no, it's no one is going to buy an English Zvachim unless they are learning Daf Yomi. So we have to market it as a Daf Yomi book or set of books. And in fact, we worked very, very hard to make sure that the volumes came out in time for each Masechta as Daf Yomi got up to it in the last cycle, the last Daf Yomi cycle.
So it's all been done in the last 10 years.
The entire new translation, new notes, and to give the credit where it's due, the people at Koren who really the layout, the full color, the new photographs that replaced the old ones or added, all of that was done relatively quickly. If you look at the first volume, so my name is big because there were just three of us working on it. And then once we got into Shabbos, we all looked at each other and said, this cannot be done. There's no way that three people can do this. And as the volumes move on, you see more and more how the team grew, and there was an entire team of editors and then copy editors and translators, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, it reminds me actually, Lahavdil, or I mentioned your early competitors, Art Scroll. You remember, I think they put out Makos, and I think it was Eruvin first, and those didn't even have the Schottenstein name on them. Sorry, not is Schottenstein? Yeah, it's Schottenstein. I mean, there's the Stone edition, there's the Schottenstein. They also start off with this Rabbi Goldworm and like two other people, and then as they went on, they got an even bigger staff, and then when they wanted to turn into Hebrew, they started from English to Hebrew. They got even more and more names. That's why I have it here. I have the Korean over here, and then the Art Scroll over here. I could see, yes, and eventually they even had. I thought that a few years ago, I think I did have a contribution to one of the Masechtas. I don't know where, but I remember when it first came out, like when it was published around Daf Yomi time, I wanted to see if like two notes that I was involved in actually made it in there, or if my name made it in there. Yes, that was quite exciting. With regards to the English, did Rabbi Steinsaltz himself ever see any translations or be involved in the translations or the changes that were made with the English edition?
I sat with Rabbi Steinsaltz and discussed some of the editions that I was doing and some of the translations that we were doing.
Okay.
He certainly, I can tell you, I remember when I first started working there in the the Hebrew hadn't been done yet, I walked into his office to talk to him, and he would be sitting with the galleys. Remember galleys, the olden days?
Yeah.
He would be sitting with galleys and reviewing them. In the Hebrew, he certainly didn't do all the translations and all the material, but I believe that he read every word before it went out. That certainly is not the case in the English. Not that he couldn't have read the English, but up until the very end of his life, he was a very, very creative person, and he always had a new project, and he always had a new idea. And I think with the English, he just felt that there were others who he trusted who were working on it, and that he was more interested in new projects that he was doing, things that, by the way, are still coming out. The Mishnah and the Rambam and those kinds of things, which are coming out even now.
So,
I sat and would talk to him when I had a specific problem. At some point or other, I have to say that in one of the meetings, someone said, "Well, why did you do it this way? Did we ask Rav Steinsaltz?" And I said, "Rav Steinsaltz, put his hand on my shoulder, and I became Rav Steinsaltz incarnate for the English volume."
Mm-hmm. When did your involvement begin?
So, like many things in life, my involvement came because of an unexpected email that I got. Okay. I had for many years. There was a period of my life that I devoted to women's education, and I taught in Midrash at Lindenbaum, which some people know as Provenders, and I taught there for a little over a decade, and stayed in touch with some of the students. And one of my students was working in the Aleph Society. I think that's what it's called. The Steinsaltz offices in New York.
Okay.
And the student reached out to me and said, "We're interested in doing a project in order to stay in touch with Rav Steinsaltz's constituency. And we're looking for someone who would be willing to write short essays on Daf Yomi based on Rav Steinsaltz's Gemara." This is well before there was English Gemara. Still from the Hebrew. We're looking for someone to write an essay, 350 to 500 words every day. And I said, "You're looking for someone to do that." And I looked around the room where I was sitting, and I was the only person sitting there. So I said, "I'll do it." And for the next 7 years, I wrote a short essay on the daf every single day, based on, it was wonderful. Someone paid me to learn Daf Yomi. What could be better? So those essays, if anyone is fascinated, if you go to steinsaltz.org, you can click on a tab that says Daf Yomi, and you can, I think you can if you give them your email, you'll get a short. My mother, who loves me very much and is very proud of me, every single day gets one of these in her email and writes to me, "I learned so much from your synopsis of the daf." It's not really a synopsis of the daf. Really, I take one thing. If there was an interesting rishon that he quoted, or an interesting biography on the side, or a map or something, I took that and did it, and I did that for 7 years. And then towards the end of that was when this project began. That is the translation of the Gemara. And I think that the Steinsaltz office said, "Well, Shalom Berger, he has just read every single line in the Steinsaltz Gemara for the past 7.5 years. Let's have him work on this project." And that's how I got involved. So we're talking now probably almost 20 years ago. And it started from these essays, and then it grew into a larger product. As I mentioned, I live in Alon Shvut in Gush Etzion. Alon Shvut has many underemployed Talmidei Chachamim. So when we realized that we really needed more people on the project, certainly not everyone, but a large number of the people who were heavily involved in the project were my neighbors, who, again, really a group of Talmidei Chachamim, who were able to take, who are also native English speakers, who were able to take on this project.
Wow. So I think that's amazing. Actually, I also found, yes, there are a lot of yeshuvim out here, especially in Yesha, where now they say Yosh. I found that the cream of Jewish society lives out here. We have many people are actually quite learned. There's no crime. The people are kind. It's the best place to find what Rabbi Victor Miller said, the true product of the land of Judea. Wise and virtuous men and women. That's another thing I was quite surprised at. They actually have quite a few women involved in this project and in the Tanakh, by the way. And unfortunately, when I was in yeshiva, we didn't get exposed to that kind of thing. We didn't know that there's actually quite a lot that the women can contribute, and I was actually quite surprised and amazed at how much they put into that, like how much is done by these women who are actually so smart and actually also know English much better than I do, and are able to correct all that. So it's a good thing that you found so many people to involve with in the projects. So I have a question here regarding about that. You met Rabbi Steinsaltz and you got to work with him, and you said you became Rabbi Steinsaltz incarnate. Tell us about Rabbi Steinsaltz, the person, because we have to remember it's a mitzvah to be maspid the Talmidei Chachamim. Tell us about him, what you knew.
So I'm probably not the best person to talk about him. I worked with him on a particular project towards the end of his life. As you say, it certainly is a mitzvah to be masked him, and I guess I'll say this publicly. The journal tradition asked me if I would write something about his derech halimud, about his approach to learning, and I told I didn't feel that I had a sense of him that would be good enough to do that, and I turned to someone named Yonatan Eliyav, who, if you open up the Hebrew volumes, he had been working with Rav Steinsaltz on the original Hebrew translation for decades. And Yonatan Eliyav said, "You're right, I should do this, but I don't have time right now." So it might come out one day. I was hoping to work with Yonatan, and he would have done it in Hebrew, and I would have, added my perspective and perhaps translated much of his. In talking to Yonatan Eliyav about it, just as far as if you want some highlights, some pointers, he said, here you have to, I don't know who our audience is, but you have to be a little bit Israeli for this. He said, Huaya Jinji, which means he was a redhead, which doesn't only refer to the color of his hair, which by the time I met him was no longer red, but it's a certain personality. He's someone who Jonathan said was very, very curious and very, very active. He was one of the first. He was one of the first one of the youngest school principals ever in Israel. When he was in his early 20s, he was the principal of the school. In the 80s, he started a yeshiva in the Soviet Union, not in Russia post Soviet era. Still under the Soviets, he opened the yeshiva, and he brought teachers, and this is of course at the very, very end of the communist period. With regard to his learning, I want to ask Yana, like where did he? My main job with the current English Talmud was working on the notes. So I worked with the translators also, but mainly my main job was with notes. I said to Yana, where did Rav Steinsaltz get all of this? So in some of the volumes in the Hebrew, it actually has people's names who, in specific areas, lent their expertise. But Yonatan Eliyav said most of it, he just was a very curious person. He had encyclopedias, and this is, of course, before the internet. Today, anyone can pretend to be an ish eshkolot and have their fingers in all kinds of different places. But he really did. He was really someone who was interested in everything, and you see it in his work, which runs the gamut from Pasha, the simplest pshat in many areas of basic books, which, as I said before, is based on an idea of opening the Torah to the masses, to any Jew who wants to learn, but up to issues of Kabbalah. His 13 Petals are books that deals with Tanya and with Torah Tasod. And these are things that he really tried, even there, to bring to a level that people would be able to understand it, even without the background of. In a sense, it was actually, and this look, he was put the cherem at one point for some of the things that he did. So on the one hand, it was the people put him into cherem pointed to very specific things. He had the chutzpah to call Shimshon Hagibor a ruffian. That's how it's translated into English. Okay, so you can decide whether you're comfortable with that. But there was something. Probably really the reason with the cherem is because the olam hayeshivot, the traditional yeshiva world, on some level perceives Torah as being something that belongs to them, and they oftentimes don't want outsiders to have ready access to it because they believe that the outsider is going to learn wrong pshat. They're going to say the wrong thing. They're going to misunderstand it and then present it as legitimate. And Rav Steinsaltz, felt strongly that we need to give access to the Torah to every Jewish person.
I remember my experience once again with the Steinsaltz Talmud was limited, I guess, to the Bava Metzia Random House and the guide, which I really liked, by the way. But then as I grew older, it wasn't around, certainly not in the Batei Midrash, with which I was familiar when I was growing up. It wasn't, at least art scrolls were available in the library, but we didn't have the Steinsaltz around. But when I made Aliyah, I found that at least the Hebrew edition, before the English started coming out, was a valuable resource for myself. I was converted to Rav Steinsaltz, I guess his methods and his writing, just for one little note he had there. He pointed out something amazing that I really liked that I didn't see anywhere else. I saw in one old version, a very old translation of the Yerushalmi, that he had a key or an index right at the beginning of all the Latin and Greek words that are in brachot, in the Yerushalmi brachot. Just to know that it's on every page. There's at least one Latin word and one Greek word, and the Aramaic of the Yerushalmi is already less known than the Aramaic of the Bavli or of let's say Onkelos. Onkelos doesn't have that much Latin or Aramaic or Latin or Greek in there, but apparently the Talmudim are just full of them, and he put it there. And Rav Steinsaltz made a note of that because sometimes people grow up thinking words like, let's say, notorikon or apoteki. Apoteki is obviously from what became the English word hypothetical, and it's from Greek, but because Chazal have a sort of, I guess it's almost a humorous etymology there, saying you can remember this apotehei kai, it should remain here, apoteki. That's obviously not the real root, but some people get away with thinking that is it because they don't know any better. And Rav Steinsaltz cured us of that by actually just marking these, and even the Arabic words. I remember when I first learned to read a little bit of Arabic, I was very happy that they had this. And it really touched me when he even pointed out what we think is a common Hebrew word, lachzor, the shoresh chet zayin resh. He pointed out that that's actually a Hebraicization of an Aramaic term. In Hebrew, to return is from the shoresh shin vav vet. And yeah, that's what it always is, hushav. And to cause something else to return is in the hifil, it's the hashiv. And that's the way it always is. Teshuvah, return, repentance, is the word. Whereas chazara or lahachzir, chazara is the regular form of the verb, and lahachzir is the hifil, cause something to return, which is a decidedly Aramaism that you find in first in Rabbinic Hebrew, Mishnaic Hebrew, in the prayers, of course, Machazir Shechinato L'Tzion, and modern Hebrew. That's not Hebrew. That's at least not biblical Hebrew. It came from the Aramaic, from Hadar. Hadar is basically Shin Vavet. Hey Daled Resh in Aramaic is Shin Vavet in Hebrew, and Hadar became Hazar. There's their cognates there, and Rav Steinsaltz included that in an early, I forget which Masechta it is. If it's not Brachos or Shabbos, it's one of the ones you're probably going to see when you're in yeshiva. So it's not in Zvachim or Chagiga, certainly not in Kresis. So it's there, and it's right there to see. And Rav Steinsaltz does that on every single page, and for that I have to thank him, because he opened up my own eyes and my own mind just to the fact that the language was evolving, and you actually see this. So I'm also indebted to him for changing the way I think, and I'm also thankful to everybody who's been working on the Korean the Talmud. I don't have a lot of volumes here, because thank God now I hang out in base matters mostly with Israelis, so we have basically nothing in English here, but we should. So that's a question you said about accessibility. Months ago, Dr. Shapiro was here talking about how perhaps Chazal did not want the Talmud to be accessible. And you see that there's certain things in there that would basically be politically correct. You can't say perhaps things that Chazal didn't want. There's a topic we just studied in Bava Basra with my chavrusa, that Chazal say if the guy's clever, he'll say this, and he has to give a taina, and really we should wait for him not to give a taina. We don't help him. It basically comes out that Talmud is supposed to be studied by people who sit on Batei Din, perhaps, and people have to paskin shailas, and it's not meant for everybody. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, the Talmud has a lot of different parts to it. Okay. So, there are large sections, certainly in the Bavli, of Agadata. Okay. Now, if you're going to tell me that it's only there to be studied by people on Batei Din, why are there all these stories? How come that we need to know those kind of, if it's for people who are dayanim, then it should be a law book. It should look like a Shulchan Aruch. It should be a list of the halachot, and you study the halachot, and then you know how to rule in a betin. I usually see the Gemara more as a transcript of what took place in the Beit Midrash. Back and forth, the conversations, those kind of things certainly lend themselves much more to being pedagogic tools. We're teaching people how to think. We're teaching people how to argue, and we're teaching people from Gadol Shimusha Yoter Milimuda, the Shimush, that it's even greater to actually study with a scholar and to see how the scholar behaves and how they act is even more important than perhaps studying. And the fact that certainly the Bavli includes all of this kind of material would lead me to the conclusion that it really is for a wide variety of people. Now, the question is, should every person learn every piece of it? Perhaps not. One of the issues that I became more and more sensitive to as the translation into English came out was, as you point out, Avi, that there are parts of it. There are parts of the Gemara that perhaps shouldn't be widely publicized. I think anyone if you Google Talmud or if you Google Jew, then you'll find these anti-Semitic sites. I'll say this, for a long time.
Yes.
The English translation of the Talmud that was available for free online was the Sansino edition, which is a wonderful resource. And the place that it was available, the only place where it was available was on some Christian hate sites called Come In Here. Might still be there if people want to look at. In which you had the entire Talmud, right? They say, we gave you a whole Talmud. But there were specific links to they pulled out every line from the Talmud that could be perceived as being anti-Christian or misogynist or problematic in some other kind of way, and those were the things that were highlighted. And as we were translated into English, the time and again, one of the questions we said was, okay, once upon a time it was in Aramaic, and it was really limited to a very to a scholarly group of Jewish people. But now that you're opening up to the masses, what do you do with it? And one of the things that we did was we added notes trying to deal with issues ranging from that seems to indicate that Chazal believed in spontaneous generation, which today I think pretty much the modern world rejects. And there we put in a note with I don't know if Rabbi Steinsaltz saw it, but certainly Rabbi Weinberg.
Weinrab.
Rabbi Weinrab, who was very involved in these kinds of questions, and we put in a note that said that until very recently this was commonly accepted. Today it's not. With some background, but even more so, notes about time and again we pulled in the famous Meiri, the Meiri that even the widow and brothers Rub who put out the Vilna Shas, even they put the Meiri in once or twice. The Meiri that says that when the Gemara talks about allowing a non-Jewish person to die and not saving them.
Hold on. We just lost you for a minute. Rabbi Berger was talking about the Meiri. We lost you for a minute there. You're saying the Meiri says about saving a Gentile's life on Shabbos.
Right. In general, the Meiri's position across the board when dealing with non-Jews, when dealing with Gentiles, is that whenever the Gemara says something not nice about them, that's talking about the Sheva Amimim. That's talking about those Canaanites who are idol worshippers and we keep the values of civilized people with regard to all kinds of things. So those people aren't treated nicely. But of course, the Gentiles that we interact with, who live according to moral and ethical principles, those kind of people we treat the same way we treat each other because they live those kind of lives. So we made sure to insert those kind of notes in order so that someone who knows nothing understands that there is it's not just that, oh, you read the Talmud and it says that Jews can be not nice to non-Jews. It's an issue that the commentaries, that the traditional commentaries did grapple with and dealt with in different kinds of ways or in one particular kind of way. But time and again, what I say to people is, if you someone who sees the totality of the Talmud understands that here and there are lines or perhaps sugyot that, according to modern sensibilities, are problematic. But if you have the sense of the totality, it's a very, very small part. The hate sites, hone in on those parts, and then one looks at it and says, "Oh, the Talmud is just full of all these terrible things," which is something that certain groups have been saying about Jews for literally millennia.
Mm-hmm. So I also, by the way, I have to give a thanks out there also for the Korean edition and the Steinsaltz edition. Unfortunately, many classic texts, specifically the Mishnah Torah and Rambam's Parsha Mishnayos and the Talmud itself, have been highly censored over the years. Yeah. And I remember when I became aware of this, I finished learning Avodah Zarah. It must have been almost 20 years ago. And then I finished Sanhedrin back when I was in New York. I visited 8 years ago. And I got back to Israel, and then I realized by opening up Rav Kapach's edition of the Parsha Mishnayos to just Avodah Zarah, I can't say I make a siyum on that because it turns out the Rambam's Parsha on Avodah Zarah is so mangled in the standard printed editions, including the ones that you'll find in the Rum Vilna edition, it's like you didn't even learn it. And also, the fact is you can't say you finished Shas. All these sections have been taken out of Maseches Sanhedrin and Avodah Zarah, and they were not put back there. Art School didn't put them back. Sometimes Art School doesn't note it. There are books you can get out there which tell you here are the collection of censored sections or censored words and things fixed in the Talmud, but it's separate from the Talmud. And Sansino sometimes makes notes of these things and puts it in the translation, only the English, but not the original text in the Aramaic or Hebrew, or Aramaic and Hebrew with a little bit of Greek and Latin thrown in there. But Steinsaltz put them back seamlessly. Just it's there, and you can actually say that you actually finished the Masechta. So if you're going to be doing Daf Yomi, you make sure you do it with the Steinsaltz, otherwise it's not complete. And by the way, that's why I have to plug it. I have to tell everybody, don't forget, Passover's in 3 weeks. Sorry, Rabbi Berger, I'm going to take some of your time here. This is Haggadah Pesach. We've been talking about it every now and then. You need it because this year, God willing, we'll have Korban Pesach for the first time in a very long time. And because most of us are unfamiliar with this in theory, and no one has practical experience conducting a Seder with the Korban Pesach, make sure you get your Haggadah Pesach now so you can know what we're going to be doing differently from what you know. It's a Sefer that I could honestly say, and I don't exaggerate, every house in Israel, every Jewish home needs a copy of this, just like you have your Maxwell house and your Art School Haggadah. You got to get yourself one of these because you have to know what to do. And
Where can I get mine?
Where do you get yours? So I was just doing a tour in Ramat Beit Shemesh today. If some people would be happy to host me down in the Gush or in Alon Shavut, I could come by and bring it to everybody. It's for sale now. And it's also available in stores at Dabri Shir. Dabri Shir is the official distributor. And you know where Dabri Shir stores are. It was supposed to be last year. But the funniest thing is their stores were closed right before Passover and didn't get to open until sometime after Passover. And our then they stopped selling Haggadahs after Passover. So our entire stock was unsold, except for online. So you can get online. You contact me. There'll be links in the description on my website or on my YouTube channel. Go ahead and look for it, or just Google Haggadah Pesach, and we'll send it to you by mail. If you live in Ramat Beit Shemesh and I send it to you by mail, just to know it will not get there. Everybody to whom I sent Haggadahs in the mail never got them, and I had to deliver them in person or resend them. But if you live elsewhere in Israel, you will get your Haggadah in the mail. I know it because people in the Gush have told me they received it, so it's available there. Ray Berger, we have a time for I think one more question here. You're involved in Viewer. If I can ask you, what adventures you have there? I saw that Rabbi Rabinovich of blessed memory and Rabbi Riskin felt that there needs to be a change, not a reform, but perhaps the Batei Din need to be opened up. There need to be more opportunities for Geirim involved. Are you involved in that in any way?
Okay, so here in Alon Shvut, there is a local bet in the Giur, which probably is illegal on some level or other. It runs out of some
legal or illegal.
It's probably illegal.
Oh, okay.
So if I get in trouble here, I hope your listeners would bail me out.
Okay.
In short, the story is that Rav Yisrael Rosen, Allah Shalom, he passed away about 2 years ago, who started Somet. And if people don't know about Somet, they should know about Somet. We don't have time to talk about it now. He was involved. The way he told the story was that with the great Russian Aliyah in the 1990s, he turned his childhood friend, who he was in elementary school with, Rav Bakshi Doron, who was the chief rabbi, and said to him, Bakshi, what are we going to do with people who see themselves as part of the Jewish people, but who halachically aren't Jewish? And Rav Bakshi Doron said, it's on you. You have to open up an arm of the Rabbanut. It became an official arm of the Rabbanut to work on finding ways to convert these people. And after a number of years, when Rav Bakshi Doron was no longer chief rabbi, and the whoever was the chief rabbi then said, "Why is Rav Rosen doing this? This should be one of our people." So Rav Rosen, who had a lot of experience with this, he and Rav Pearl, who was for many years was the Rav here in Alon Shvut, they had worked on the Ma'arach Giur of the Rabbanut. They said, we're going to try to help people who, for whatever reason, the Rabbanut can't help. There are all kinds of complicated reasons why the Rabbanut will or will not deal with a specific individual who comes before them. So they have been running this for quite a few years. About 4 or 5 years ago, I became involved, not because I'm a big Talmud Chacham, I'll say that publicly, probably because they needed an English speaker, because for many of the candidates, English is a language that they speak on some level or other, and it has been fascinating. I walk out of these meetings inspired by people who so much want to be part of the Jewish people, and who it really is impressive. You want one story? I'll tell you one of the. Oftentimes, people come for Giur because they are involved in relationships with Israelis, and they would like to get married and raise a Jewish family. By the way, they sincerely want to raise a Jewish family. Perhaps another time we can talk about how to deal with the fact that you're not supposed to convert people who are converting for a reason, but that's for a different conversation. But there was a couple once came in. Neither of them were Jewish. Husband, wife, neither of them were Jewish. They were in Israel on a humanitarian visa as refugees. They were from Crimea. And apparently, because of the war in Crimea, they somehow got this special visa to come to Israel, and they ended up living on a yishuv, on a religious yishuv, and they were just so taken by the lifestyle, by the way people treated each other, and they became more and more knowledgeable and interested, and they went to an Ulpan Giur, and then they came to us for conversion. Right? And these are people who could have lived their lives totally happily as non-Jews married to each other. There was nothing pushing them. And the two of them came forward, and I was with Rav Pearl in that Betin, and Rav Pearl, you ask different kinds of, most questions that you ask are questions that any person who keeps mitzvot knows the answers to. What bracha do you make on things? What are the Jewish holidays? What do you do on them? How do you arrange your Shabbos? What do you say in davening? Rather still, what are the basic principles of faith? Those are the kinds of questions. And then every so often you throw in other questions to keep it interesting. So Rav Pearl asked this couple, what do you do if basically it's what's a harag val yavar? What mitzvot are there that you have to give up your life rather than transgress this particular thing to do? So we were talking about that, and Rav Pearl said, let me give you an example. Let's say someone comes to you and says, make me cook for me on Shabbos or I will kill you. What are you going to do? So the woman said, I don't understand the question. He said, someone comes to you and says, boil up a cup of tea for me on Shabbos or I will kill you. And the woman said, well, I would make an akli shlishi. So Rav Pearl said, okay, that's a good answer, but that's not what I'm looking for. Somebody said, I'm going to kill you unless you cook for me on Shabbos. You cook for me. And the woman said, well, he was threatening to kill me. I would kill him. Oh boy, okay. She knows her stuff.
So that was a very impressive. These people come and again, time and again, these very, very, the people who come to us, because we say to them, and this, I'm sure the people who are listening know that literally this week, this is in the headlines here in Israel, but the people who come to us know that we don't offer them anything aside from being Jewish. We don't offer them citizenship. We don't offer them rights. The only thing that our Betin offers them is Giur. And there's nothing in it for them, aside from a commitment to keep mitzvot and to raise a Jewish family. And again, time and again, I walked away from these interactions inspired. Wow. Yeah, that's actually quite inspiring. I get inspired also by people's journeys. They come here. It's one thing for many of us who grew up from community, and it's just we were raised that way. It's a whole another ball game for those who actually did not grow up with it, like Rabbi Steinsaltz himself, also, who have come to be attached to Shekhinah, who have gone out of their way to, let's say, leave their family and friends, their comfort zones, and all their preconceived notions and their education, everything they knew, and to search for the truth. Rabbi Shalom Berger, who I finally got it. I'm going to get it right this time. He's the director of English language programming at Herzog College, and also the senior content editor of the Koren Steinsaltz English Talmud. It's complete. So I guess you're the former editor, right? Previously the editor. Thank you very much for joining us. And
thank you, Rabbi.
Well, we'd love to. I'm not going to put you on the spot now, but if you want to come back again, please do so, because we have a lot to discuss. We didn't even get onto the Parsha. But don't forget, everybody, it's Parsha Ki Tisa this week and Parah, so don't forget that. And also, it's not Shabbos Mevarchim yet, so we'll still have time. I'd like to remind everybody, don't forget, like, share, and subscribe. Get your copy of Haggadah Pesach. And we'll see you next week. Be well and have a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Avi.